Hello, everyone. Welcome. And I'm here today with Autumn Wilson, a social media manager and coach, encouraging people to find their voice and spread their positive messages to the world, providing the strategies for building an authentic brand and establishing strong connections with audiences. Thank you so much for coming today, Autumn.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here and so happy to chat with you.
Yeah, I'd love to
Oh.
get into your experience. So you started with Twitter, you didn't have that many followers, and you had this tweet that got to 29,000 retweets, 145,000 likes, and it got you to 2,000 followers. And I'd love for you to really just spell the myth that you'll have a viral tweet and automatically you'll have thousands of followers, when really it takes time and patience and consistency and really authenticity and branding to get those followers. And it's not really like a magical tweet. And I think you're the perfect example of that because the people who decided to follow you were the people who believed in your voice and have so much in common with your voice. Almost like you're speaking for them when you tweet. And I think that's just such a
Mhm.
beautiful part of Twitter is you can connect with people who have the same voice or have a voice that uplifts you, which is something you know so much about.
Mm.
So yeah, if you could just talk about what the experience was like to have so much attention on one of your tweets.
Yeah, well, I didn't even know that it had happened because I had posted that tweet, I think, just before I went on vacation, and I had all my notifications turned off. And Twitter, for some reason, was like glitching for me at the time, so I wasn't even getting like even when I went into the app, I would open it up, I wasn't even getting notifications. So I didn't even really know what was happening until I think you and I had a conversation and you were like, "Congrats on having all of the." I was like, "Wait, what?" And I had to go back and check and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is insane." So I did. I jumped and I had just started with Twitter like a few months prior. And I was trying to show up every single day and just I was repurposing a lot of the content that I had put out on my Instagram and my Facebook page and just like kind of starting there, but wasn't really putting a lot of thought into it. And then through following you and kind of learning from you and some of the stuff that you were teaching and how you were showing up on Twitter is what helped me kind of refine what I was doing because, a lot of the stuff was, yeah, I was giving value in social media tips and things like that, but it wasn't kind of, in the moment and authentic in the sense of like just like me speaking from the heart in terms of like what I was feeling or what I was going through. So that one tweet that I had put out was actually a quote from somebody else, and I didn't give them credit because I didn't know who actually said it at the moment. I just heard it, I think, in a reel on Instagram, and I was like, I love that. And even the reel on Instagram, like it wasn't credited properly anyway. I should have researched it and I didn't. So I just put it out there because it just spoke to my heart in that moment. It's really what I needed to hear. And that's basically what it was all. I was like, I need this in this moment. And it was just, I sat with it and it was just so real and so true that I just decided to share it. I just kind of put it out there. I typed it up and hit send and crazy response. And yeah, I gained like 2,000 followers. But like you said, I wasn't expecting that much, but when you think of like, yeah, going viral, you expect tens of thousands of people to come flocking in. And it's like it doesn't really work that way because now it's a matter of still building that trust. One tweet or one video or one post isn't going to make or break you. It's that showing up consistently. And like I said, it was just in that moment, I was like, this is speaking to me. And I hope that this gives somebody else kind of the hope that they need in this moment too. Wasn't even related to social media. I mean, it is in a roundabout way. We could talk about
Mhm.
that, but it was more so just talking about, finding happiness in life and that kind of thing. So it was, yeah, it was really an interesting experience. Um, and now causes me to kind of look at how I show up for people now moving forward. Before it was kind of like I have like 20 followers. I don't need to worry about, doing, but now it's causing me to think twice. So every time I go to create a tweet, it's like, okay, how am I showing up for these people now that they're here? They're following me for a reason and I want to show up for them in the right way.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I'm shared in the module for this one, that I was showing up in a way that wasn't my authentic self after someone said I was unworthy of the followers I had. And then I realized it and I realized my voice was really in like the frequency of gratitude, and I went back to that and kind of like reclaimed my sense of gratitude and believed in my worthiness, and really like grew a lot from there. Like I think maybe like 10,000 more from that space.
Nice. Yeah, it's so true. And it's so, I mean, the hate is crazy on social media. And I run into this all the time where that's a common myth that no, it's not really a myth, but it's a common challenge that people come to me with is like, I don't want to be on social media because there's all this hate. But I mean, if you really focus on it, then sure, it's all that's there. But if you focus on the good, then that's all that's there. It just depends on what you focus on. I mean, the hate is real and it is rough. And there was like even that one tweet that got like 145,000 likes and I don't know, like 1,600 comments or something like that. I had to stop reading some of the comments because there was some hate in there. And I was like, oh, this is, and I just decided to digest it all in one shot. And I don't even think I got through half of them. And I was like, no, I need to stop. I need to step away because these people, you know, they have a right to give their voice and say whatever they need to say, but they don't get to determine how I feel in this moment. Like, that's not up to them. That's up to me. And so just like pulling myself away from that scenario. I still haven't read like all of the comments because I'm like, I don't want to put myself in that position. And but it's so hard. It's so hard on social media to not, because it's like intrinsically trained in us to just establish our value from the likes and the follows and
Yeah, so I have
yeah.
a technical question. For me,
Yeah.
when I started getting a lot of comments and followers and things like that, Twitter actually gave me an option to only get notified from people who follow me. So I only receive notifications from the people who follow me. So if someone who doesn't follow me comments on one of my posts, it won't show up in my notifications. And I have my notifications settings turned off for my phone because obviously, if you're growing on a social media channel, you can't have that constantly
Mm-hmm.
interrupting your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, did you get like any filter systems from Twitter with that?
I didn't check if I got any new ones. I haven't
Mm,
checked because I have my notifications turned off. Like you, same with you, like with I have so many social media platforms that I'm managing that I need to turn them off. And so I only get the notifications when I go into
mm,
it. I have, with the exception of Instagram, I'll get a notification if someone comments. For like likes and follows and things like that, I turn them off. But I haven't, but I should go and check and see if I have new settings in Twitter now that I can turn that on for. Cause that, yeah, it does make a difference, right? Cause then you're filtering through. It's like,
mm.
if they don't follow me, then I don't know who they are and I don't know if they're going to be good. They may be really crappy people. So I don't
Yeah, and
want to.
it's so important to realize that kind of like, because I think when you're at like maybe like 20 followers, like you think to yourself, like, oh, I couldn't manage like 10,000. And like so much of it, like, is like it's system based. Like these social media platforms have algorithms to make it so that you see the comments that are important to you and that you can manage it and you can have like great filter systems put in place and you can change your own filters. So it is manageable and it is something, it obviously it takes time if you're going to read through the comments if you have 10,000 followers, but that's time that's like worthwhile, like if you do that with like intention.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's very important that you do make sure you're taking care of your mental health and that you're not managing your social media presence at the sacrifice of your well-being.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I mean, nothing's worth that sacrifice, right? It's really not at the end of the day. We let it kind of get in our head and think, oh, if I don't show up, then I'm gonna lose whatever. I'm gonna lose the algorithm or I'm not gonna get farther the next day. It's like nothing is worth sacrificing your mental health over, especially for people that are halfway across the world that may not that don't maybe know what you're going through or what's going on. It's not. It's yeah. It's definitely not worth it. And I say the same for all social media. And that's why I always tell people, when they're especially when they're first getting started, they say, oh well, I can't do it every day or I can't show up a couple times. It's like then just start with where you can start. There's no sense in running yourself into the ground trying to like beat the algorithm or do the things that everybody tells you that you should do. And then all of a sudden you hate what you're doing. You don't like the content you're putting out. It's not intentional. and you just want to get off. It's like this should be somewhat fun. It should, you should
Mhm.
enjoy the process of connecting with people, and that, and I think that's where people lose it, is like social media is this beautiful place where you can have like authentic connections with people that you never would have met in real life, and that's such a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. It's great.
Yeah, like for me, I've taken a step back, like when I was growing on Twitter and like I didn't tweet for a while. And I started getting messages from the people who I was kind of like closest to on Twitter. And like, they were just wondering if I was okay. And I think when you kind of like feel like people care, like it's way different than just like posting to post. Like when you like don't show up and people are like, oh, like I miss your tweets or just wondering if you're okay, like you remember that like it is a community and that these
Yeah.
are real people, that like sometimes people will say like, oh, your tweet made my day. And like I think that's just like so sweet. And like you never know what impact you're having, especially because like sometimes people will say something about like, oh, like yeah, I've been following you for months and like you're really kind, and like this idea that like you don't even realize people are noticing you. And sometimes they don't engage with you, or they'll engage with you but they won't really put that much heart into it, like they'll just answer a question or they'll like a post or something. And there's so much depth to these real connections online that I think a lot of people don't talk about because a lot of the hate is so loud.
Yes. And it's like we are setting an example. Like, not to say that we're like big famous people in any means, but just by, even if you have 20 followers or 10,000 followers or a million followers, you're still setting the stage or setting an example for your followers. So by showing up authentically and being your true self, you give other people the permission to do the same. And that's so powerful and that's so amazing. And I remember the first like truly like raw, authentic piece of content that I ever put out on social media. Um, I think I was talking about my infertility journey. It was something related with infertility, and I think I associated it with like with identity, and I was just talking about identity. The amount of messages that I got from people, and again, this is just like you never know who you're impacting. I got direct messages from people who were like, that is what I needed to, this is what I'm struggling with. Like, thank you so much for putting that out. They never commented publicly. They didn't like the post itself. They didn't share it, but they sent me a direct message to say, thank you. I needed that. I had family members calling me to say, I love that you put that out. That really helped me. And again, it's like they're not engaging with the post itself, but it meant something to them. So yeah, you never know who you're impacting. And that's why we call them vanity metrics, because it's just a number. It doesn't really truly show the impact that you're having. So
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so powerful that you mentioned that sometimes people will be impacted by something, but they might not like it or comment or specifically on Twitter, like retweet it.
Hmm.
Because I see that in a lot of my suicide prevention stuff. Like people won't share it, but someone will be like, oh, like this is really impactful, or someone will be like, actually, like I'm in a place where this is like really relevant to me, or someone will be like, yeah, I was like really upset over the weekend and I remembered like your one point on your 11 reasons to keep going. And like that's the stuff that like keeps you going because like some people like don't feel comfortable putting their like personal things in a public arena. And I think
Yeah.
like for a lot of people who are growing on social media, like you specifically if you're a writer or an author or a poet, like you have to have some sort of like sense of like building your personal brand in a public way, because people are going to be interested in like what do your poems mean or like your books and things like that. And I think it's so important to remember that you get to choose what you get to share. And
Yeah.
also, like, you might have some vulnerable feelings with sharing something vulnerable, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth it or that it's the wrong thing to share, because you don't always feel so good after you post something that makes you feel vulnerable. But like a lot of the times, like, people will reach out and people will be impacted by it. And for me, like, I know sometimes I might have to like push a certain point in like several different ways and post a lot of vulnerable things before people actually reach out and said this really helped me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like going back to what you said before too, is that you're almost giving other people a voice. You know, you're giving them that it's like giving them permission that it's like this is okay to feel this way, to think this way, to say these things, but you're giving them a voice when they can't find it themselves or don't feel comfortable sharing it themselves. And I think that's so important because it makes people realize that they're not alone, right? This isn't like them versus the world. Like you have community here of people who are feeling the same way. And I just put a post out last week. I'd put out a video on my Instagram saying that I had canceled all my content that I had regularly scheduled because I was just feeling really down and just having a really crappy time. And I just didn't feel right putting out, here's some social media tips and here's a cool reel and here's me dancing or whatever. Like I didn't feel right doing stuff that I had pre-planned because I was like, this isn't where I'm at in this moment. So I canceled it all and put out that video. And the response was amazing. Like so many messages from people saying like, "Oh, thanks so much. I've been feeling this lately. Like glad to know I'm not alone. It's not just me." And then almost every conversation I've had with people since then has been like, "Yeah, I'm really struggling right now. Like I don't know what's going on. There's just it's a weird vibe. I don't know if it's the
Mhm.
moon or whatever. You know, everyone's like talking about what's going on, but it's like it just opens up the conversation and it just gives permission to feel and be open and like okay, and it's like a primer almost. It's like okay, I'm just putting this primer out to the world, so if you're dealing with me in the next couple days, just know I'm not at my best. There's like something weird going on. And I think that's just such like having that kind of authenticity and transparency in your life just relieves pressure on yourself, but then just like opens up more conversation with people. That's just like a way stronger of a connection. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of digital detoxes. So like if you do
Mm.
feel like maybe like not posting for a while would be like good for you, then like you can just like tell your audience, "Oh, I'm doing a digital detox. I'll be back when I can, or I'll be back when I feel like it's the right time." Things like that. Or like if you're on vacation and you don't want to tweet, like you can just be like, "I'm on vacation," like things like that.
Exactly.
A lot
Yeah,
of times
exactly.
people overcomplicate like kind of like having a presence and being there, and it's like you don't have to like answer everything like immediately. You don't have to like have your notifications on your phone and like go to every single one. Like it's really about just showing up as you are. And sometimes like you can not answer a comment, but you might answer it in a tweet and people will understand who you are by that. And sometimes just being yourself is more powerful than defending yourself.
Always. Yeah. And it's nice because I've been like trying to share this kind of stuff on my like in my own socials, talking about being true and being authentic. And it was really funny because I had one of my followers on Instagram, I had put a post out about how to create engaging content, and there were like a couple of different posts in there. But I didn't put like being authentic or like being honest or anything like that. It just what I don't know, it wasn't something that crossed my mind. I only had so much space, whatever. And then one of my followers actually put in the comments like being authentic with your audience, and I was like, yes, thank you. Like I love that. You know, it was like, yes, you're like you get it. This is what I've been trying to say, and it creates a whole different kind of experience with people, and we can even think about it in our own terms of how we consume social media, not necessarily what we put out but what content we gravitate towards. It's like we gravitate more towards the people who are real and true and you know, and that's why I follow people, even like famous people who are way more real to the point where it's like they're putting out videos of them like at the gym with no makeup and their hair up and they're all sweaty and like it's like that doesn't matter. It's the message that they're putting out is what matters and they're just showing up as they are and that's just a wonderful invitation for everyone to just be like, the way that you are in this moment, however it is 100% okay. Like, you don't
Mm.
need to be anything else than what you are in this moment. And it's just that like open invitation for people that I think is so important.
Yeah, and also the idea of celebrity, like I feel like in when you're in a community and you're like growing on social media, like you might not think people look up to you or like see you as a role model, but like if you have accomplished something someone dreams about, like sometimes you have to like recognize that that person sees you as a chapter ahead and that you have to honor that and that someone might not I don't know, like see you as a celebrity, but sometimes it's like those teachers that are just a step ahead that have more of an impact than even someone who has like a massive impact as a celebrity in the world.
Yeah, definitely. It's like what I think it's Dean Graziosi talks about that all the time, where it's like who you were a year ago or 2 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever it is, what did they need to hear? So even if you're just a year ahead or a couple of days ahead of the person behind you, right? There's always going to be a succession of those people. Just like we're looking at someone who's accomplished where we want to be in a year.
Hmm.
We're still looking at that like, oh, that's where they're at. Like that's so inspiring or that's motivational or that just gives me the extra courage that I need to keep going. And yeah, you are that person for the someone that's coming behind you because there's a whole slew of people that are coming up the same journey that you took that are just coming in a little bit behind you. And that, yeah, that little message could be exactly what they need.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think there's so many people who I've like considered role models of mine on Twitter that I've learned from because I didn't really have a course on how to grow on Twitter. So for me, it was really like learning from the people that like had a few more followers than me and kind of like seeing what they were doing, what was working. It's very much look at my analytics. I was always obsessing over my analytics. So I was kind of like even saying to myself, like, what did like past me do that like I could reiterate? And like I tested out and experimented. And I think like that idea that sometimes like your role model is yourself, like is just so powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Or even the person that you want to be.
Yeah.
Just having that belief in yourself that you're like, this is the person that I want to be. And believing that you will be that person without a shadow of a doubt. Like that's the person I'm going to be. No doubt that's who I'm going to be. And then just believing in that person and believing in who you are now to get there is just so powerful.
Hmm. And that kind of brings us back to worthiness. So for someone who is at like a minimum follower count, what would you say to them if they say they feel unworthy of reaching that first 10,000 follower mark?
First of all, no one can determine your worth but you. You get to determine what that is. Um, and and like we've been saying, there are people out there, no matter how small, no matter how minimal, no matter how tiny that pool is, that need to hear your message. And so by letting the limiting beliefs or the imposter syndrome or the feeling not good enough, by letting that stop you, then you're not giving those people what they need in that moment, right? And it's like yes, there's tons of millions of people out there that are all sharing messages, but you have a very specific way of saying it and sharing it that will resonate, that will only resonate with a certain amount of people. And so by kind of thinking about it that way and thinking like that's they don't determine your worth, you do, you get to determine how you put that out to the world.
Mhm. That's beautiful. And in terms of authenticity, what does the term authenticity mean to you?
Being true to whoever you are in any given moment. So to me, I'm like, it can shift and change. It's like right now, I may need to be sad. Another moment, I may need to be happy. Another moment, I may need to be angry. And it's just honoring where you're at in any particular moment and just staying true to that being.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, that was like my authentic voice was always coming from a place of gratitude. Like if it was like a milestone, like 3,000 followers, like one of those like round numbers, um, I would be like, thank you so much. Like, because it meant so much to me. And, something that I think a lot of people say, it's like, oh, it's just a number, it doesn't mean anything. But I feel like if you do it in the right way, like you grow a community, you get to know people, then these are real connections and they are real people. And like every single, like 10,000 followers is 10,000 people who are interested in what you have to say. And I think it's just so important to focus on kind of like the idea that these are people who have hearts, who have lives, who are struggling with things and are happy about certain things. And like that's what they're connecting with is that you're human.
And if you think of it in terms of like people in a room, like if you bring it back to reality, say, what if I had 10,000 people in a room that wanted to hear what I had to say? Or what if I had just 10 people in a room that wanted to hear what I had to say? That would still make you feel like you're having an impact, even if it's just
Hmm.
5 people, right? So no matter how big or small your following is, you're still having an impact. And so if you think of those people in a room, even if you're sitting at a dinner table with a couple of your friends and you say something that everyone's like, God, that was awesome. Like, I really loved that. I love that you said that. Even if there's just a couple of friends, you're just like, oh, that makes you feel good. And you're like, okay, well, good. I'm glad that I could share that with you. So it's like that applies no matter whether you have 5 followers or 500,000 followers. It's like
Yeah.
it's still the impact that you're having is still important.
Yeah, and that's actually why I rarely delete a tweet because, I think a lot of people have this mindset that like, oh, if it isn't like a popular tweet, I'm just gonna delete it. And like, that idea that like, okay, like four people liked this tweet and one person commented, like this meant something to those people. It's like people can look at your timeline and sometimes it's the things they don't interact with that mean the most to them or that show who you are, and that could be like why they follow you. And I think a lot of people like gloss over this idea that like if a tweet doesn't get engagement, then it's not serving its purpose. Like there's like a deeper purpose to what you put out there, and that's why it's like I occasionally do delete a tweet if it's like I feel like it's not my authentic voice. um
Yeah.
which happens sometimes because sometimes, or like if it's like really confusing, like like do you ever tweet something and you're like that actually doesn't make
That
sense, like that
yeah.
like that's not a sentence.
Yeah.
Which like occasionally happens. So
Yeah.
like if it doesn't make sense, or if it doesn't sound like me, like I know it's weird to say that, but sometimes like if you tweet a lot, like you will put things out there that just don't sound like you, that like you might just kind of like post something in like the heat of the moment, or you might post something because you're thinking about something else and it is confusing. So kind of like just like putting things out there that are like raw and authentic in a way that like it actually like means something to people even if they aren't a part of your life, I think is so important.
Yeah, 100%. I know. It's so true. And it's like the extra stuff doesn't matter. I'm actually working on a blog post about this right now. It's like the extra stuff doesn't matter. And I was talking about in the concept of like creating videos where people like worry about like the right backdrop and a good microphone and a good camera and blah 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 blah. But that stops them from creating content. And so I would say the same thing on Twitter is like don't worry about whether this tweet is going to go viral or if you're going to reach the right people or whatever. It's more about the message. Like the extra
Mm-hmm.
stuff doesn't matter. It's just what's the message that you need to share with people or that people need to hear. And that's what matters. If you just like keep your focus on just being authentic and sharing a positive message or sharing your message with the world, then the rest will take care of itself, or the rest will come with time. And as you learn or as you grow, then the rest will kind of fall into place.
Absolutely. So if there's one thing you'd like to leave everyone with, a thought or a message, what would it be?
You are perfect just the way you are.
I love that. So true. And especially when you're growing, being yourself is so important. And just I'd like to reiterate, I know I'm really heavy on this message, but repelling the wrong people is just as important as attracting the right people. So just remember that if you're losing followers but gaining ones that matter to you, like that's part of your mission, and it's not something to be afraid of or to feel guilty about. Like just be who you are, and like have that kind of magnetic mindset that like the right people will come and the people that aren't right for you won't. And also if someone's harming your community, remember it's okay to block them and don't feel guilty about blocking someone.
100%. Yes, I love that.
Thank you so much, Autumn.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much.